But I'm inviting people while we're talking. Thank you, everyone who is attending. I'm Ken McLeod. I'm the policy director for the League of American Bicyclists. I run our bicycle-friendly state program that ranks states. We try to do it every other year. Sometimes that gets a little complicated. Our last ranking was in 2022. And the big news there was we had our first new #1 state in the history of the bicycle-friendly state program with Massachusetts. So I am very fortunate to be joined by the top 3 states today and representatives from their state departments of transportation. So we have a great panel with Peter Sutton from Massachusetts DOT, Jessica Horning from the Oregon Department of Transportation, and Barb Chamberlain from the Washington State Department of Transportation. So we are gonna kick it off with Peter, who I will make host so he can share his screen.
All right, thanks, Ken.
And you should be the host now.
Okay. Let me bring up my screen here. Can you see my screen?
Not yet.
Okay. Do I have to toggle something on my end?
Yeah, so there should be a share screen button at the bottom.
Oh, okay. Yep. Go. How about now?
I see it now.
All right. Very good. Well, thank you, Ken, and good afternoon, everybody. My name is Pete Sutton. I'm the statewide bicycle and pedestrian program coordinator for Massachusetts Department of Transportation. Thanks, Ken, for the introduction. I have been with DOT for almost 15 years now, and the past 7 of them as the statewide bicycle and pedestrian coordinator. I kind of got I've had a over 30-year career in transportation, starting right when I got out of college, being a bike messenger, then graduating to a taxi cab driver, and eventually working in a traffic operations center for almost 15 years, giving the traffic reports that you hear on the radio and see on TV. And I eventually migrated over to MassDOT because I was really interested in advancing biking and walking. That's what that's my favorite part of transportation planning at this phase. And in 2016, my predecessor retired as the statewide bike and ped coordinator, and I took over, and I've been in that role ever since. And was very happy to get the news last, it was just about a year ago at this time that the League of American Bicyclists came out with their rankings of the bicycle-friendly states. And I was as surprised as anyone to see that Massachusetts had shot up to the top position of #1, was not expecting it. We've been hovering in the top 10 or top 5 in the past like 3 or 4 years. So it was a great honor, and which brings us here today. Ken wanted all 3 states to talk about how we got there, and the success that comes with it, and maybe how to stay in the top by keeping on doing things. So the first slide. That is my title, Bicycle and Pedestrian Program Coordinator. Emphasis on the word coordinator. At any point during the day, I am just constantly brokering information back and forth between folks internally at MassDOT. There's upwards to 1,000 of us in the agency statewide, and shunting information back and forth between our press office, between our highway division, between folks in planning, with all of our partner agencies that I'll show you on the slides. So there is a lot of back and forth. I like to think of myself as a broker of information, for want of a better term. And with that, I'll begin with the actual with the actual ranking itself. So yeah, we got the news last year. Infrastructure and funding, we got an A on, which is great because we are trying to roll out as many projects as possible with the funding that we have. And I'll go into that detail a bit more as far as our criteria for rolling out projects. Education and encouragement, very important to us, especially advocacy, our work with advocacy groups such as Mass Bike. I know that they're a big presence down there. I wish I could be down there in person with them, but hopefully next year. The one piece that we scored low on was traffic laws. It says consider traffic laws related to bicyclist safety and practices for automated enforcement and preventing racial disparities in traffic law enforcement. That's one of a few things that I will get to eventually. Policies and programs such as complete streets. MassDOT has long been a champion regarding that. Evaluation and planning. As far as where I am in the planning department, spearheading that. So, as you can see in the grades, bicycle-friendly actions, we scored pretty well. One of the things I wanted to touch on, and that I'll go into a bit more detail, is the very top, one of the most robust responses to COVID-19 in terms of creating space for people. Charlie Baker, our outgoing governor, the administration's Shared Streets and Spaces grant program awarded $33 million to 183 municipalities and four transit agencies for a total of over 300 projects. This response is commendable, and the lessons learned and people engaged through the program should inform continued efforts, and they have. Another thing I wanted to touch on here was the Municipal Modernization Act of 2016 that allows municipalities within our state to establish regulatory speed limits on locally owned roadways lower than the statutory default speed limits. Just for a point of context, Massachusetts, or rather MassDOT, my agency, controls relatively little of the state's roadways, less than 20%. And most of that are interstate highways, bridges, and tunnels. The rest of the 82% is all under local and municipal jurisdiction. So this is a big get for local agencies. Also, a couple more points of note. I'm happy to provide this update. As of January 2nd this year, our legislature passed an act to reduce traffic fatalities. It is now law. So we have gone a long way towards addressing that D that we received in the report card. A lot of this bill has been in legislation for the better part of 10 years, and it includes vulnerable road users definition, which includes people walking and biking, roadside workers, people using wheelchairs, motorized bicycles, scooters, skateboarders, roller skates, and other micro-mobility devices, even including farm equipment. This is also, we established a safe passing law. We're the 36th state, I believe, to establish that. MassDOT is going to be requiring 4 feet for motorists to pass cyclists and other vulnerable road users on roadways. I know a lot of states have adopted 3 feet, but we just thought it important to include that extra foot. Also, truck safety devices, side guards, especially on MassDOT and other state vehicles that we contract under. The safer speed limits has been bolstered as to what I was just talking about a few minutes ago. Standardized crash reporting, we're looking to beef up that internally at MassDOT with all of our state agencies that do crash reporting, and also a rear red light requirement for cyclists. So a lot provided in this one omnibus bill, and hopefully that will put us in better stead in a couple years when the next rankings come out. hopefully covering our bases. So that's a good place to start. And I will continue on with the presentation. All of this points back to our high ranking goes to, I think, the 2019 bicycle and pedestrian plans that MassDOT put out in May of 2019. Excuse me for a second. I'm trying to deal with all the open screens here. Yeah, both
Peter,
of our yeah.
On the subject of open screens, can you check your participant tab and see if there are people who need to be admitted?
Oh, that's on me, right?
I guess that's part of switching the host to you, and I just realized that, so I'm very sorry for the people who have been waiting to get in, and that is entirely my fault.
No worries. Yes, there are people. So I will do my best while I'm presenting to let folks in.
Thank you so much.
And if anyone knows, I think we can both. I think that I can co-present, and you can also co-present and monitor that. I'm pretty sure that's a feature of Zoom, but if you could get some assistance, that'd be great. So yeah, getting back to the bike plans, our statewide bike plan hadn't been updated since 2008. Our pedestrian plan, even before that, 1998 rather. So they were definitely time to update them was definitely at hand. Just a quick look at the vision for both plans. Biking in Massachusetts will be a safe, comfortable, convenient option for everyday travel, eliminating fatalities and serious injuries, and increasing the percentage of everyday trips made by bicycling. Here's our vision and principles, which I'll go by in fairly short order. Just some distance buckets. Only 1% of people in Massachusetts commute by bike right now. We definitely want to raise those numbers. Our metrics for rolling out bike infrastructure was the potential for everyday biking, where we used anonymized cell phone data by a third-party provider, and that using various matrix from the census and combining other things, we came up with areas of potential biking. This reads more or less like a population map within the state. High, medium, and low. Obviously, most of our cities scored very high. Calculates the likelihood of everyday short trips by biking if safe, comfortable, convenient bikeways existed. And that has been a game changer. We've also built it into our engineering directive criteria, as you see the piece highlighted. For all roadways classified as a corridor with high potential for everyday biking as defined in the bicycle transportation plan. It lays out the steps. The bicycle facility shall be a shared use path, side path, separated bicycle lane, or a buffered bike lane, if any of the following apply. Some great photos rolled out all across the state. A couple of bridges of particular note, the Mass Ave Bridge, which is just got a road diet over the past year. It went from 4 to 2 lanes, where we gave 1 lane completely to bicyclists, and that has turned out to be a huge game changer. I use that personally myself when I commute into Boston at least a couple days a week. Skipping over some slides because I wanted to highlight the Shared Streets and Spaces program, which I think this is what really put the state of Massachusetts over the top for these rankings. These were grants focused on quick build projects that support public health, safe mobility, and renewed commerce in municipalities. This started in June of 2020 as a direct response to COVID. Eligible projects include permanent or pilot sidewalks, paths, bike facilities, outdoor dining, traffic calming, and transit improvements. The grants provided between 20 and 500,000. I'm happy to report that as of last summer, we've awarded $50 million through almost 500 grants. And there is another round coming up this year. We decided to make it permanent. Other things that added to this are the bicycle facility inventory that we keep on adding to. One of the big points in the bicycle plan was just really bolstering our data collection. And I am responsible for upkeeping the bike facility inventory. As you can see, 907 miles of existing shared use path. 43 of those miles are under construction. 150 miles are funded for construction. And that's in addition to the 40 or so projects in the statewide bicycle and pedestrian programs that have been launched since then, and about another 40 projects that are still in the pipeline. We also have internal working groups. I chair a bike and ped program with all internal staff at MassDOT once a month, where we talk about everything going on in our 6 districts and in headquarters. Also, we have a bicycle and pedestrian advisory board. Oh, sorry. I see that my time is coming up, so I will wrap things up within the next couple of minutes. In addition to these, additional funding within Massachusetts is the Mass Trails program. That's a joint partnership between MassDOT, Energy and Environmental Affairs, and our Department of Conservation and Recreation, where we fund trails grant programs to municipalities and other agencies all around the state. That's in addition to our Complete Streets program, our Gateway Cities Parks program, and our Safe Routes to School programs. Complete Streets numbers at a glance here, another round coming up. Gateway Cities Parks program, $3 million awarded last year, and $11.8 million awarded to the Mass Trails program, 81 projects. Very, very great, fulfilling program. We've also, as part of the bike plan, rolled out an entire how-to section on learning about speed management, particularly for all of our municipal partners, so that they can better make for safer roads on their areas. Some policy stuff. We're already into our next phase of bike and ped planning, where we're looking to drill down deeper into some other metrics. That's modeled after the Mass Trails Priority Trails Network, which you see here, where we have our spine trails network all connected up. That's envisioned with all the other trails in the state eventually connecting up to that. We'd like to do that with on-road bicycle infrastructure as well. Some facts and figures regarding the bipartisan infrastructure law, the 26 Transportation Improvement Program, some significant gains there. Data, as always, a huge important part of everything that we measure at MassDOT. And I'll close just with one of my favorite parts of my job, and that is the meeting that we have every year called the Moving Together Conference. This is put on by MassDOT, and I am, for all intents and purposes, the talent booker, whereas I coordinate with all of our state agencies and municipalities all around the state, where we have a great conference where we highlight biking, walking, and transit infrastructure. Last year, we had over 1,000 attendees in person and 300 virtual, a huge success. One of the things that some of you might have heard on at the national level was the MBTA, our transit agency around Boston, had to shut down for the month of August, and MassDOT was tasked with providing bicycle routes from the north of the city along the Orange Line tracks into, and some pictures there showing that we had a big roundtable look back on that as part of the conference. It was a big success, hugely attended, and a great blueprint for future scenarios where we're doing this kind of planning. Also wanted to mention that we launched a new bike wayfinding design guide, which we were really pleased about, and already is gaining a pilot program down on Cape Cod that the regional planning agency is using that. So a lot of information thrown at you in this short time span, but happy to answer questions when we do the Q&A, and really looking forward to hearing about Washington and Oregon, because obviously they're on the left coast, we're on the East Coast, very, very different circumstances there, and hopefully can learn some stuff from Jessica and Barb. So Ken, I'll kick it back to you.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. And it was great to be at the Massachusetts DOT's conference. It was amazing to give a keynote speech to so many people and get to recognize all the great work that you're doing. I think the work around speed management and the shared streets and spaces program really were two things that stood out to me at the League of American Bicyclists, and was a huge factor in putting Massachusetts over the top into the #1 ranking last year. Jessica, I wish I could tell you that I could just make you a co-presenter. The only option I see is to make you a host. So similarly to Peter, you may have to let people in, and I appreciate you just rolling with me. I wish there was another way. I'm just not seeing it.
That's all right. I will do my best to juggle screens here. And hopefully I am sharing the right one.
It looks like it.
We're #1 in the West. All right. Well, and I just have to say thanks, Pete, for all that great information. I went to Boston, Cambridge for a trip in October, and it was definitely one of those trips where I came back with more photos of transportation infrastructure and bike facilities than of my friends and family. Which I guess leads me into my introduction, and thanks, Ken, for inviting me to talk. I'm Jessica Horning, and I am the Pedestrian and Bicycle Program Manager at the Oregon Department of Transportation. And a little bit of background, I am a lifelong bike nerd with a background in anthropology, planning, and engineering. And for the last 10.5 years have been applying that experience in what I kind of call an advocate role for active transportation in Oregon, initially as the first active transportation liaison in our Portland, Oregon metro region, and now at the statewide level coordinating our team of active transportation liaisons statewide, our governor-appointed Bike Ped Advisory Committee, and also managing a smattering of pedestrian bicycle infrastructure funding programs. So I wanted to, oops, and I forgot to set my timer because I can talk. So I wanted to spend the 15 minutes today just sharing some of the foundational work that we've done in Oregon to earn this reputation as a bike-friendly state, and some of the challenges that we've uncovered as we've done that work, and particularly as we've started to dive into data and evaluation parts of things, and the strategies that we're trying to pursue to address those challenges and maintain or live up to our bike-friendly rep. So, oh, okay, this is how this waiting room thing works. There we go. So, getting into the policies, programs, planning, evaluation, all kinds of overlaps for us in Oregon in terms of the areas we're looking at for that the league is looking at for the bike-friendly state rankings. And in Oregon, we've been at this for a really long time, and our strong policy and planning support for active transportation has been really key to our success. We were the first state to adopt a complete streets bill way back in 1971 that required a minimum of 1% of our state highway funds to be spent on ped bike infrastructure at a time where we were still having that debate of should we even spend highway funds on ped bike infrastructure, and then also required us to build walkways and bikeways whenever we're building new public roadways or reconstructing roads in Oregon. So that was our really strong start. Our Oregon Transportation Plan has had a goal of eliminating traffic fatalities and injuries on our roadways since the 90s. And our latest Ped Bike Plan that was adopted in 2016 has really helped us now make a pivot to focusing on equitable access to transportation options for folks of all ages and abilities. So what's up on the top there is just the opening sentence of our vision from our current Ped Bike Plan. So we've had that long-term vision, we've had it for a long time, but really what has been helpful for us in our day-to-day work and moving things forward is that we also have a very concise 5-year implementation work plan that has 3 key initiatives that are guiding the work that we're doing at the DOT. So that's this defining the network, figuring out our data needs, and using that to create performance measures and evaluation metrics for our programs. So a big part of that defining the network piece of our implementation work program has been updating our design guidance. Sorry, admitting folks again. Updating our design guidance with what we initially called the Blueprint for Urban Design. It's now been incorporated into our 2022 Highway Design Manual. And this has been a big lift effort for us and a big change that moves us from that traditional plug and play, look at the highway classification, speed volumes, get that minimum standard and design around that, that is your 5 or 6 foot bike lane, to a performance-based, context-based design approach where we start with the ideal facilities from a multimodal, context-appropriate standpoint and have to justify designing down from that when we're designing our projects. So this has really led to us having a much stronger emphasis and ability to get separated pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure in our projects, and has also helped us with some things I'll talk about a little bit more later, which is managing speeds by having target speeds based on land use contexts. So that was a big step. And I will say that one of the things for success with that is that the Blueprint for Urban Design was not just an active transportation led effort. This was really championed by our designers and engineers who are participating on National Cooperative Highway Research Program efforts, seeing performance-based design and what the trends are at the national level. And this was really sold as, we need to get ready as an agency for these big changes that are coming down the pipe with the next update to the AASHTO Green Book and things like that. So that's been a big piece of this. Then also talking about collaboration with national research efforts and our traffic safety and engineering team. We have our highway safety, our Ped Bike Safety Implementation Plan that gives us a better understanding of what the risk factors are for pedestrian and bicycle crashes on our state and local roads, so that we can now use that data to systemically improve safety on our system rather than just waiting for crashes to happen. This is all feeding into our active transportation needs inventory, which takes that risk factor, crash history, social equity index, accessibility information, and combines it all into an index score so that we can look at any segment of our highway and say, what is the need for investment in active transportation there based on these criteria? And that really helps us tell the story of why do we need to invest in an area, both for funders when we're applying for grants and for members of the public who want to know where their project is at in a queue and why is this community getting funding before we are. Then last but not least, we are getting our planning and design staff out in the field and in the classroom for trainings on all of this new guidance, all of these new data sources, and particularly getting them in on bikes to see and experience firsthand what all of these new facility designs feel like and how they operate, so that it's easier for them to understand how to apply that in projects they're working on. So that is the really good foundational work on the policy and planning front. On the data and evaluation side of our implementation plan, we've discovered some real serious challenges. So we have a key performance measure on network completeness. And while we would really hope that we would be close to complete with our Complete Streets bill in place for 50 years now, we are still at less than 50% complete on our state highway network. And we have not met our performance target on this measure that we report to the legislature every year since we established it in 2006. This is something we're using to help communicate about our funding needs, and that minimum 1% of our state highway fund isn't enough to keep up with our growing urban areas in the state. We've also found our other key performance measure is our number of fatal and serious injury crashes in the state. And we found that even though we have been fairly successful at leveling out or stabilizing the number of people dying that as motor vehicle occupants in the state, that our number of vulnerable road user fatalities has really continued to increase in the state. And when we dive down into that even deeper of who is most impacted by those crashes using that equity lens that we have in our strategic action plan as an agency, we find that the same trend in Oregon that we find nationwide, that the communities where our most vulnerable residents are living is where we have even higher impact to vulnerable road users. So about 3 times more likely as a person walking in a lower income community or a community with a larger Black, Indigenous, people of color population, about 3 times more likely to be injured or killed in a crash while walking in those areas compared to our lowest social vulnerability areas in the state. So what are we doing about all that? And based on this learning from our data and evaluation, well, looking at the laws and enforcement piece of the state rankings, we discovered that speed is really the major contributing factor to the majority of our fatal and serious injury vulnerable user crashes, and have really been focusing on that from a law enforcement and state policy perspective. So Oregon in 2020 moved to a new process for setting speeds in the state with a new set of administrative rules, really applying the best practices. Again, we're getting from national research that says that 85th percentile is not a good way to set speeds. So we are now going to be using 50th percentile and land use and the presence of users outside of cars to be setting our speed limits within our urban areas, and also having a lot more flexibility for setting speed zones outside of our urban areas. Sorry, if folks are seeing me do this, it's just that like little admit button. I keep trying to distract. So we're really working on the speeds, also working with our legislature and local partners to expand automated enforcement for speed and red light running across the state. So that's on the law and enforcement side of things. That automated enforcement is also helping us with some of our equity issues that we're working on in the state. On the education and encouragement side, we've also found, in addition to speed, substance abuse other human behaviors are the other major contributor to our crashes in the state. So we've been ramping up our education efforts in cooperation with our traffic safety office that is now in our Department of Motor Vehicles, and with our community partners. For this piece, we're really leaning on providing grants and developing those partnerships with folks outside of the DOT and our community-based organizations, because those messages about about behavior change and about how do we prevent these sorts of crashes, that message doesn't come across as well from a state level agency as it does from those local community partners. So really leaning on that network, trying to really focus on a positive community norming framework. This example of our Oregonian crossing, every intersection is a crosswalk campaign that we did with our friend Sasquatch was our first venture into this approach that was pretty successful. And now our partners at Clackamas County have really just been doing amazing work with this approach. And we're looking to Barb's team for a lot of this in Washington. So hopefully she'll talk about some of that as well. We really lean on our partners, the Street Trust, which is our statewide advocacy organization for our Active Transportation Summit that is coming up in April. And ODOT is one of many sponsors for that event. And then also on the education and encouragement front, we just upgraded to a fancy new web store format so that we can, like I said, we're mostly providing content and doing those contracts for graphic design to develop the messages that our community partners are saying they need, and then providing those materials for other folks to get them out. So folks can order all the free safety and educational materials they need from our web store. Last but not least, on the infrastructure and funding side of things, which is generally what folks want to talk about first, we were able to use all of those key performance measure and inventory data efforts that I talked about earlier to really tell a story prior to our last state transportation improvement program development cycle about what the need is for active transportation on our system. So that we could say, at our current level of funding, it is going to take us over 180 years just to complete a basic sidewalk and bike lane and crossing system on the state highways in urban areas. So that's not just your kids aren't going to see the system, your kids aren't going to have a complete system to walk and bike to school. So that was very successful. In 24-27, we got a historic increase in public and active transportation funding from our Oregon Transportation Commission, on top of some increases to funding that we got from our legislature in the 2017 session. So in 2017, we were able to we had a successful statewide campaign led by our partners at the Street Trust to dedicate $10 million a year in state highway funds to a Safe Routes to School grant program, since we no longer had those federal funds. That has now increased to $15 million a year in 2023, and we are working with the legislature to expand eligibility for that program to high schoolers, expand eligibility to places within 2 miles of a school from just 1 mile, and lower or eliminate the match requirement for that program. We've got our community paths program where we've just bundled together everything that is not associated with the gas tax into as big of a pot as we can to promote those off-street paths that we know are attracting more people to walking and biking and addressing some of our safety concerns. And then a whole slew of new little pilot programs based on the innovative, the IIJA federal infrastructure funds, and some initiatives from our Oregon Transportation Commission. So innovative mobility grant that's focused on micro grants and equity focused partnerships with community-based organizations, a Great Streets program that is a pilot specifically looking at how do we rehabilitate our orphan highways, those major arterials in urban areas that don't serve as highways anymore and need a multimodal modernization effort. And just in the last 2 weeks, we're tasked by our Transportation Commission to create a new state-funded rapid response program to implement ped bike safety assessments and rapid response improvements within 6 to 12 months of fatal crashes on the state system. So this is gonna, I will wrap this up real quick so Barb can get started. We've got a good history. We've got a lot of challenges ahead of us. In terms of better practices, collaboration and building a big tent has been key for us. It's hardly anybody's actual job description to do this work and care about active transportation, but folks are really excited to get on board the team and do this work that feels good if you start to build that team, just like Pete was talking about his monthly internal and external team meetings that he leads. We have a monthly crew at ODOT that we affectionately call the A-team, our active transportation team that's open to anybody. And while we only have about 5 staff that are specifically active transportation, we have about 30 people that sit in on that meeting on a regular basis. Focusing on the areas that everybody can get behind. We operate in a very target-rich environment with active transportation and bicycle advocacy, but there are a lot of places that are controversial and you can spend a lot of energy on, but there's these places like safe routes to school and increasingly safety for us that are the win-wins. Everybody has a child in their household or in their life that they can identify with, and they want to be able to get safely to and from school and have that experience of freedom and mobility of walking and biking. Everybody has safety concerns. So really lean into those areas, embracing the constructive conflict and screw ups. We are in an area where everybody's got strong feelings, and you're working with engineers. That analysis paralysis and desire to get things right can be a momentum killer. So getting to that place where everybody's equally mad at you for doing kind of the opposite thing and moving forward, and doing that annual look back at, okay, how can we improve and get closer to that ultimate goal every single year has been a really winning approach for us. Using data to support equity and transparency has been huge in terms of our equity goal in our ped bike plan, and repairing and developing relationships with our external partners. And then especially just looking back at that funding program slide, this is where we have not done well. Keep it simple and build on success. The more you can develop those big core programs that everybody's aware of and build on them, and not just channel things into these niche boutique programs, the better. That's really where we've had success. So that's all I got. Sorry for going a little over time, Barb.
No,
Thanks
thank
so
you
much.
for that. Yeah, Oregon is a longtime leader. Oregon's data really stands out for your high mode share and the safety that you have along with that mode share, at least when you look at like fatalities per bicycle commuters. It's really strong track record that Oregon has. So it's great to see how you're building upon that, and really excited to hear all of you're doing and how it's moving forward, that design guidance that you have worked to implement. Excited to see that, excited to see other states build upon that, excited to see NCHRP and AASHTO guides build on that. Definitely looking forward to all of that. And thank you for managing admitting people and all of that. I'm sorry for that technical challenge of this meeting, but really excited to welcome Barb as our final host and speaker before we can have some conversation amongst the three of us. I'm originally from Washington State, so I'm very sorry that we were not able to continue to recognize Washington State as the #1 bicycle-friendly state. I know it is not a reflection of the work that you do, which is amazing. And we continue to look to Washington as one of the leaders in this country. So very excited to have you with us today.
Thanks. I like to think of this as listening to a three-way tie, just for the record. So I will do a share screen. I can't wait to see all the little pop-ups for people who need to be admitted. There's already somebody to be admitted. Okay. Yeah, that's going to be fun. So you should be seeing my full screen, not the one with all my notes, because I don't want you to know what I'm going to say next. And let me quickly move that. This is the challenge and the opportunity of multiple screens, is getting them in the right place. So again, thanks for having us all talk. I am learning a lot and making notes, so maybe we'll all have sort of identical submittals next cycle. My name is Barb Chamberlain. I use she, her pronouns. I am speaking to you from my home in Olympia, and I'm on the traditional lands of the Squaxin Island people and other Coast Salish people. I want to note that our agency does many things in partnership with tribal nations, including having them on the steering committee for our active transportation plan. One of our regions partnered with the Yakima Nation on a successful RAISE grant. We consult with tribal leadership regularly. That does not change or overlook the fact that those lands were taken from them originally and that they are still here and they are our partners. So I wanted to be explicit and direct about that. I have the privilege of being the first and so far the only director of the Active Transportation Division that my agency created in 2017. I came in as an advocate, and actually we looked to MassDOT when we were advocates saying, look, they created this position that reports to the head of the agency. Wouldn't it be awesome to position active transportation so it's taken seriously as modes? And we had great leadership, and that happened within WashDOT. So I just had my 6-year anniversary. We've been working to create decision-making tools to help our agency do its work. And what I hope to do today is talk to you about things that you would be able to implement, whether or not you have the kind of supportive leadership that we have, the legislature that has just expanded investment substantially. You might be listening to some of what we do saying, oh, I could never do that. So I want to give you some of the yes, you coulds on some of the topics that go into the ranking. In our agency, we talk about creating a system that is safe, sound, and smart. And when Secretary Millard talks about that, he always says safe first. And we all know that for active transportation, safety is the barrier to mobility and to expanding participation. If it doesn't feel safe, it doesn't operate safely, if I can't cross where I need to, I might drive instead, if I'm able to drive. So we're talking about the needs of non-drivers and everybody being able to move safely. And the first takeaway I want you to think about is that when you're creating a plan or a document or a data or a graphic, whatever you're making, you're creating the built environment for policymakers. So just as a long straight stretch on a highway invites drivers to drive over the posted speed, you can create an environment of information and data placed in the context of stories that people relate to. And I definitely heard that, with Jessica describing things that sound a lot like some of our work. What's relatable about it? Tying our programs and the things we care about to the things that other people care about. They might not wake up in the morning and have active transportation for breakfast the way we do. So what are the things that they need? What are the benefits they care about? What are the places they care about? Roger, Secretary Millar quotes, I think it's the head of New Zealand, saying, we measure what we treasure. But I think in transportation for a long time, we've been treasuring what's been easy to measure. And that's the movement of people inside vehicles. And so we need to remember to ask, what are we not measuring? What are we not describing or optimizing? And as we're doing our work, asking, who are we doing this for? If we say we're going to improve decrease wait time at an intersection, for whom? Because if we're decreasing wait time for drivers, we might be increasing it for the pedestrian. And talking about our work as safety for everybody, I like to point out that 100% of us are pedestrians. At some point, you do get out of the vehicle, even if you're a driver. And we know from our data, like every state, that you cannot address active transportation safety without addressing transportation equity. Our plan came out in 2021. We're very proud of it. It's won multiple awards. And I think one of the most important things is it created confidence among policymakers that we know what to do with increased funding. And so a new transportation investment package passed in 22 has a big increase in dedicated funding from carbon auction revenues, so it's not a gas tax. And we have the opportunity to complete and connect our networks, to do that in partnership, to improve safety. And when we do that, then we expect to see increased participation. I also wanted to start by acknowledging that the rankings are very frustrating for state DOTs. Sorry, Ken, had to say that, because we fill it out, but we only do some of the things that show up in the rankings. And different states have different systems, who owns what, who budgets. My secretary couldn't say, here, have several $1 million to do COVID street response, because we are very line itemed. And so if we just think about the players, you have the state agencies, and it's not just the DOT, it's, education, it's health. Our rec trails dollars go to a different agency. Our traffic safety is in a different agency, and each state has its own structure. The legislature, the governor, advocates, not just bike advocates, but the other ones who show up, cities and counties are organized. Do they want more automated enforcement or not? MPOs, RTPOs, counties, tribes, school boards, planning commissions, emergency responders who are going to affect your fatality and survival rates, people who ride bikes or who don't, drivers who hit and kill people or who don't. So the work we're all doing is in this larger context. And I just wanted to be realistic about that we can't have a 51 place tie for first. It's gonna take a while. But that means the work we're doing is shaping that environment for all of those people, not just for our own agency work. I'm going to go pretty quickly through a couple of things we did that are very similar to what you just heard from Jessica. We definitely used an equity analysis in our plan. Active transportation users die out of proportion to our mode share. That is especially true in places with higher proportions of people living in poverty who are more reliant on active transportation and transit access, and also for folks who are Black, Indigenous, and people of color. And so just knowing that you need to do an equity analysis so that you can understand the numbers and where things are happening. For us in infrastructure and funding, I feel like we're doing well as a state generally, but still not good enough. Our secretary has stopped saying we do data-driven work. We do values-based, data-informed work. So what outcomes do we want? And then what do data tell us about what needs to change to get to that outcome? And so I will say we've de-emphasized the idea of counting people using walking or biking, because drivers are easy to count. They have a complete network. I can drive all the way to where I was born in Idaho, right? Without having to think about whether there's going to be a lane for me. So instead of trying to compare apples, cranberries, and hazelnuts, I tried to choose a product from each of our states. Can we focus on measuring the network and what's missing in that and how to connect that? And think in terms of transportation infrastructure for everyone. Where we don't have the data, where you don't have the data, you need to say that out loud and say, here's the whole. So we aren't measuring pedestrian delay at this intersection, or probably at any intersection. We have some big new wins, substantial new investments from our legislature. Our plan is actually baked into state law now. It says gaps and needs as identified in the state active transportation plan. And we have an expanded Complete Streets Directive. It means we are screening all of our projects and walking and biking our baseline needs. And so we're doing a tremendous amount of work to expand that Complete Streets approach. When I say measure the network, I want to emphasize you can use different methods. What Peter described was one way, the potential for mode shift. We did level of traffic stress and focused on population centers. Whatever it is, you have an opportunity to say, here's what we have, here's what we don't have. Education and encouragement, I feel like I would just be sort of channeling some of what Jessica just said. We've had dedicated Safe Routes to School funding before the federal government. But at the same time, when I was an advocate, I was saying, if we keep funding at the pace WashDOT's been funding, because we were getting grants from WashDOT, it's going to take us 30 years to reach all the schools. And so that quantification of the scale in place or the scale in time would be really a valuable, effective tool. And one of the big wins in our most recent transportation packages, we have a new expanded statewide bike safety curriculum program. That build out is going to reach 90% of all the elementary school students, and it also has a junior high and high school program. So that's just incredible. That's a game changer. And the kids will all have a chance to earn a bike, which is tremendous. I also wanted to give a shout out to Disability Rights Washington for promoting Week Without Driving. And if you search that hashtag, this is something any state can do. And we had people from other states participating, and you could ask your own staff to participate, your leadership, set an example, have those other people thinking about what is it like to move around. As I think Jessica was saying, don't just drive the project, you walk or bike the project. In traffic laws and practices, one of the things that has happened in our state is that we're getting together and talking about it when it's still a draft concept, sometimes, not always. But on our e-bike update, when we adopted the class 1, 2, 3 structure, the governor's policy office actually brought people together, including WashDOT and advocates for mountain biking, as well as for just general biking, and said, what laws would work in our state? And so we had a collective understanding. Then somebody went and found a sponsor for the bill, not WashDOT, but having the conversation when it's still a draft and being a resource to say, this is something we could implement, or if you change to this word, it would be so much easier to implement. That's actually information that you could share with someone, but you have to have those relationships and conversations. We talk a lot about self-enforcing roads that give drivers information. Now, I know I want them to have the information so they see me and they stop in time so I can get across the street, but that's a benefit to the driver too. Instead of saying we're going to outsource our safety to law enforcement, can we build the roads that give those design cues? I also wanted to put a pin in the concept of expanding automated enforcement, which our state has definitely done. We have more and more places where a jurisdiction can put those cameras in. But where do we have wide, fast, busy roads? Where are people more enticed to speed? We need to look at the equity implications of expanding that enforcement, and that's an analysis that you can provide and then say, is that the effect we meant to have? We too are emphasizing safety over speed and building a body of work around speed management, both legislative policy, but then also those kinds of supportive tools. We led a work group that developed a policy framework that locals could adopt with that kind of target speed. What should the speed limit be for this to be the place we want to have? And anybody could use this and adapt it. And I'll drop some links into the chat when we have time for question and answer. And we'd already been updating our design and traffic manuals. We're continuing to do that. So that's an ongoing process. Whoop, 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 whoop. That went way faster than I meant to. Preview of coming attractions. In policies and programs, I think I would ask you to look at all of the different plans you produce and say, do they all align and do they reinforce each other? Washington was the first state in the nation to set the aspirational goal of 0 traffic deaths. We still have the goal, but the trend line is still going in the wrong direction the way it is for all of us. Our legislature created an active transportation safety council that was charged with making reports to the legislature, and they've been picking those up and enacting them. Your ledge might not be inclined to create that, although I did present on this to the National Conference of State Legislatures last fall, so I'm hoping that some of them got inspired. But whether or not you convene it or the legislature creates it, having some drill down into what are the issues and what would fix this legislatively, that's information that could be provided, and just getting your state plans into sync on these critical issues like speed management. So as a result of one of our Safety Council's recommendations, the authority to lower a speed limit without a engineering traffic study was expanded, and it now includes us as well as counties and cities. In evaluation and planning, what are you measuring? This, do you measure what you treasure? What are you measuring and what aren't you measuring? Do your models include all of us? Probably not. Are you citing research? I know engineers love to say it needs to be a research-based recommendation, but the research probably didn't ask all the active transportation questions. So flag that. I used to work for a research university. More research is needed. And then as you do this evaluation or as you share information, are you creating graphics that really tell a vivid story? And a couple of things that we're doing that your agency could do, this is from our state of transportation slides, the annual cost to all of us for what we spend in the system, whether it's direct or indirect costs. Safety costs our taxpayers and our society far more than congestion or environmental issues or lack of preservation. So he shows them this slide with billions, and billions is impressive and too big to get your head around. So then he translates it into, what if you were paying this as a gas tax? This is the hidden cost of safety. And if we were paying for safety, we would be paying an extra $4.73 a gallon at the pump. And so that's an attention getter. That's saying that's a real cost. We just can't find it because it's hidden from all of us. So you could calculate this for your state. And those are all based on federal figures, federal sources. We're not deciding how to calculate safety. So I want to wrap up just by saying you can do plenty that will hold on to the bar and push it up for all of us. We are creating the official documents that other people can cite. So what are you putting into your documents that will provide the data, tell the story, create compelling graphics, and give policymakers things that they could then run with? And I'll stop there and look forward to your questions and our discussion. And I didn't see anybody else to admit, Ken, so I think you can take back the power.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And thank you for all the amazing work that you're doing in Washington. I've seen one question come in so far. I hope more people chime in with more questions. I'm gonna, I guess, maybe take the first question, or actually the first thing I'm gonna do is just acknowledge that you're absolutely right when you say that we asked state DOTs to fill out this survey, but what makes a bicycle-friendly state goes far beyond state DOTs. In our last report, we tried to highlight the ways that governors and legislators play important roles, but if we want to pursue one of the goals in our strategic plan at the League of American Bicyclists, which is that every child in America receives bicycle education before they graduate school, we need to do more with departments of education. We need to develop those relationships in the ways that we have hopefully developed relationships with state DOTs. So you are 100% absolutely right in that it takes many agencies to make a bicycle-friendly state, and it is a vast oversimplification to see our rankings and think that that is a reflection of the state DOT and the state DOT alone. So I hope people get that message, because that is the correct message. But taking the presumption of first question, I want to hear a little bit more about kind of rural bicycling and how state DOTs are addressing that. It's something that comes up a lot, is rural areas, rumble strip policies, other policies. Kind of what's on the leading edge of state DOT approaches to biking in rural areas? Open to all of you if someone wants to jump in.
I'll say a bit, and I'd love to have Jessica talk about your bike routes, because I was just in Oregon, so I was seeing signage and seeing what I thought of as a highway shoulder with bike icons and bike route signage. So that was really awesome. We don't have that everywhere. Our rumble strip policy actually is recognized as a really good one. Adventure Cycling Association put out some information on that. We are working as part of also speed management, saying if you narrow the travel lane, you can add that to the shoulder without officially widening the shoulder. You didn't change your runoff and stormwater issues there. And looking at, can you do essentially a rumble stripe, meaning the rumbling element is in the paint that cues a driver before they actually move off the road, and it leaves a little more addressable space for a rider. So that's the kind of thing that can happen. I also, in our plan, we focus on population centers because that's where the most opportunity for mode shift is, and also where the most crashes, serious and fatal crashes are. But we also laid out what could be, we just called it an opportunity. If you connected the existing trail systems and finished them and then connected between population centers, what would it look like to essentially have a statewide highway system for riding? We laid it out as an opportunity. It's not, that doesn't mean somebody has picked it up and run with it, but we were really trying to spark conversations in places that aren't yet planning for trails to think about what would it mean if, what would you do if you had a shared use path alongside that highway? We sort of mapped our highway system because that's the existing right of way we know about. So that's a bit of it. I don't think our level of traffic stress approach really is fully baked when it comes to understanding traffic stress in a rural area. For those who aren't familiar with it, there's plenty of work out there, and I'll try to drop a link into the chat. But if you think of it as wide, fast, and busy, those are the elements of the index. A rural road could be really quiet most of the time, and then the logging truck goes by. And boy, was it stressful in that moment at high speed with a big load. It's a different element of stress. So I don't think any of us have the full answer on how to measure what we want to change in a rural area. I just want separated infrastructure. The more I ride, the more I want to be separated.
Yeah, so I guess we've got plenty of rural area that we're working with in Oregon. We actually go so far as to have places that don't even want to be called rural. They prefer to be called frontier. So we are having conversations about things like bike-friendly cattle grates, because we have open range that is also the scenic bikeway that we advertise as a partner with our Parks and Rec division and Travel Oregon. So we definitely, in those areas, I mean, rumble strips and are one of our big bang for the buck safety systemic measures on roadway departures, which are another one of our major crash trends. So our active transportation liaisons and traffic safety folks work real closely to consider what are the cycling demands in these areas and how do we accommodate for that, and do we do something other than rumble strips because of that conflict. We've also got the policy for rumbles with the at least 4 feet of operable shoulder space if we're going to put them in for when people are biking, and a gap pattern so that you can get out of that as a cyclist. A lot of the areas with their blueprint for urban design and that urban design guidance, our definition of urban is pretty much anything that's got roadside development on it. So that includes a lot of those developed areas that folks think of as rural a lot of the time. We just call them rural unincorporated communities and have design guidance that just focuses on separated paths or wider shoulders with some more innovative ways to accommodate people walking and biking without doing that full urban design of curb and gutter in those areas. Or how do you retrofit a walking biking facility on the other side of just a ditch swale in those sorts of communities. So it's an area where we're continually learning and evolving, and the FHWA Star Guide is really good and a place that we started out in that area as well with trainings with our staff.
And I can just finish by saying that some of Massachusetts' most popular shared use paths are in rural areas, especially in the western part of the state in the Berkshires. And we're constantly expanding our network out there, and with it, the encouraging the municipalities to improve their bicycling network, getting to these trails. Oftentimes, people are driving to the trails just because there isn't really safe bicycle infrastructure. It's true out in the Berkshires, and it's also true on Cape Cod, if anyone has ever been out there too. A lot of people go to the Cape because of its rail trails and shared use paths, but the infrastructure leading to them sometimes leads a bit to be desired. So that's where we're focusing our energies and improving bicycle infrastructure, getting to these great destinations and popular tourist spots.
Yeah, thank you for those answers. And that STAR guide, the small town and rural guide put up at FHWA really is a great resource, has a lot of interesting infrastructure ideas that work for rural areas. So got a question from the chat and a few more have come in. So do any of your agencies play a role in land use planning? I know in the bicycle friendly state ranking, we have 0 questions about land use planning, and that is absolutely a major oversight. It is also something that I don't know how to fix and ask a good question to each state that they can answer about land use planning. This person who is in Minnesota says that land use patterns are a huge hurdle for them. And I think that is a common experience for everyone. So if you have any role in land use planning or have any insights in how state DOTs can have a role in land use planning, please share them.
I could maybe take a first stab at that one because Oregon's got a pretty good history on land use planning as well. So we have the transportation planning rules that were adopted back in the 90s, and that's what created our urban growth boundaries and requirements for multimodal planning in local transportation system plans and requirements that transportation projects be consistent with transportation plans. That is why everybody learns about Oregon in their intro to planning class. So ODOT is not the lead on land use planning. We have the Department of Land Conservation and Development that takes the lead on that in our state, but they recently did a rulemaking effort to update those transportation planning rules. It's now called Climate Friendly and Equitable Communities. And so we're pretty involved as a partner when there's big efforts like that, because those rules are very much focused on trying to provide requirements and best practices on how do agencies balance those land use and transportation planning needs. So that's going to be really interesting for us to see how rollout of those new transportation land use planning rules work over the next year or two. There's a lot of legal challenges. It's got some good things in terms of parking requirements, changes to that, a level of traffic stress targets. There's a lot in there. One of the land use challenges that we come across a lot, particularly going back to that last question of rural areas, is exclusive farming and forest areas where we're trying to build paths, where the way those land use codes are structured, even on highway right-of-way in those exclusive zones, you can widen the highway as much as you want, but there's lots of legal challenges on building shared use paths. So that's one we're working on right now.
That sounds like quite the challenge.
I'll add in Massachusetts, a new law that has become front and center is one that mandates cities and towns that are served by the MBTA, that's the transit agency that serves the whole Metro Boston area. They have to zone for multifamily housing now. And those zoning rules are mandatory, and that the state or any outside advocacy group could sue non-compliant towns. As you can imagine, this has been a huge hot button issue, but the law was created because our housing crisis is dire at this point, and we need more multifamily housing. So indirectly, that affects land use with what communities are building. And you know, again, MBTA is one of MassDOT's closest and most direct partner agencies because they controls so much of the public transit in and around Eastern Massachusetts.
Yeah, and I think this is another one of those things where every state has a different agency structure. So in our state, the Department of Commerce oversees the Growth Management Act, which is similar to what Oregon has, I think. That was, I mean, that is not a bill, not a section of law that gets easily amended, let's just say. And this session, there is a bill that's made it through the House, it's over at the Senate now, and a lot of work has gone into it. And this is where every word matters. It is being amended, if it makes it all the way through, to speak to not just traffic demand, but multimodal transportation demand and safety. And the original safety language in it referred to safety for the majority of roadway users. Who do we all think would be counted in majority of roadway users? So we, as an agency, we're reviewing it. We do bill analysis. We provide feedback. So we said, you know what that really should say? It should say, and it's in there now. It took a while. It took some persistence, but it now says inclusion of transportation facilities and services providing the greatest multimodal safety benefit to each category of roadway users for the context and speed of the facility. That's very wonky. But it doesn't say majority of roadway users, because that would mean make drivers safe and everybody else just jump. And so those kinds of places, wherever it is in your state that land use planning is being regulated, whether it's, you know, is it statute or is it rules or is it trainings being given, what words are they using to talk about safety? And I think that ties to the land use piece as well. That's not the same as increasing housing density and some of the other tools we would need. But we are engaged in it as an agency. We are saying it's really important to achieving transportation safety and mobility for everybody.
Yeah, I was thinking if Twitter could add one question to our bicycle friendly state survey about land use, it'd probably be about banning single family homes. But I'm hearing it's a much more complicated issue than that. So hopefully one day we get to addressing that issue because it is so major. We had a question in the chat about standardization of infrastructure data. Do you know if you have similar data to each other as states? And is there an effort amongst state DOTs through, you know, an NCHRP or AASHTO or TRB or another forum that is trying to aggregate that? I know in person at the National Bike Summit, we've had people from FHWA that are maybe launching a national bike network database, which sounds promising, but we also know people bike not just on bike networks. So we need to have kind of standard data wherever people might bike, which are all roadways. So can you talk to kind of standardization and data needs?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I keep asking for a federal mandate. Sorry, FHWA, but please make us track certain assets, because they make us track car assets. So those are tracked. There's definitions. I want to be told that I have to do it, but that hasn't happened yet. And so, yeah, I think we should have that, continue to have that conversation. There is one effort to be aware of that there's a USDOT funded effort that University of Washington, it has a grant for on sidewalk data. So that's not bike facilities, but to develop an open source platform to do work around not just is the sidewalk there, but what's its condition and is it meeting ADA accessibility standards? And could you map a route? If you were somebody who's using a wheelchair, do I know whether I could get there? And so, so that's an effort that's underway. Maybe that serves as a bit of a model, and we're talking with them to make sure that that data could move in and out of our system so that as we collect more sidewalk data, we'd be able to do that. Our agency is also talking about mobile LiDAR as potentially an effective way to collect data. And I know other agencies around the country are doing it. We're not a leader in looking at doing that. Yeah, so I also know that the AASHTO Bike Guide will be coming out. It's being balloted. Jessica and I are in meetings on this. It's being balloted. There will be a new AASHTO Bike Guide. I think that too will give us some things that all the state DOTs are looking at that would say what is a PBL and all the rest.
I was really hoping you were going to say this year, and I didn't quite hear that.
I think I could, but I think I could.
I mean,
I don't know how long it takes to actually publish the thing.
Peter, it sounded like you wanted to jump in here too.
Yeah, I think FHWA will eventually develop some kind of national standard that all of the DOTs can follow. I know that it's something that I know that their GIS crew is definitely working on and interested in. I've had a couple talks with some of those people. Just at the Massachusetts, at the state level, we're lucky at MassDOT that we've devoted so many resources towards our GIS staff and keeping our assets as updated as timely as possible. I know that I oversee our bike facility inventory that I showed a slide of in the presentation earlier, and I literally meet with our GIS staff every week for a couple of hours, and we update all of the new and existing and planned bicycle infrastructure that's happening within the state. You'd be surprised at a state as small as Massachusetts how much stuff we have going on, but it's it's something that we feel is important enough that we want to devote that time and resources to. And also just to when you're updating your bicycle inventory, I mean, I've found from my experience that just keeping it simple is the best way. We have 4 categories. We have bike lanes, we have separated bike lanes, we have shared use paths, and we have the other category, which is pedestrian bicycle priority roadways, that don't really fall into those other 3 categories. And that's it. We just have those 4 categories planned and existing. And it's much more manageable than having double that number or, or more. I think less is more is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I agree 100% with that keep it simple. We just did our first crosswalk inventory a few years ago, and the list of things that were on our want to have attributes initially is 5 times bigger than the 4 attributes that we actually ended up having that were necessary and we could keep up to date. So in Oregon, we've got a really good inventory on the ODOT system and have again been using that data to kind of tell the story of what is possible with data just on the ODOT system. But we need more data and a standard format to be able to do this at the statewide level, which is the network that people who are actually on bikes care about. They don't care about who owns the road that they're using. So we are just starting up an RFP right now that ODOT's going to be managing. Part of that climate friendly and equitable communities rulemaking that I mentioned is a requirement to do an inventory of pedestrian and bicycle facilities within MPOs in the state. So it's not getting the whole state, but it's one step farther on starting to collect standardized data. I think we're going to be looking to that FHWA bike network research that was completed, and I'm unable, unfortunately, to find the link in a quick Google to put in the chat as kind of a start, as well as we're just going to be gathering what's everybody got and what matches up, what are the similarities to try to keep it as simple as possible and not reinvent the wheel.
So I'm hearing keep it simple. I tried to hold up a paper that I got and it does not want to be recognized. All it says is it's the National Bikeway Network Data Portal and a not very friendly to say URL. So people Google that, find it. From what I've heard, there have been one state submitting data so far, but it's very new. So hopefully we get more states submitting data. I think a lot of state advocates probably look to your 3 states and see your political landscape as pretty favorable to biking and walking. Can you talk a little bit about how political leadership has been important or has not been important to the advances made? do you have advice for places that might not have the same sort of political support that you might have? Maybe from like an internal, like, how do you still get things done in an agency if you don't have that support?
I can go first. Just in Massachusetts, MassDOT and all of our agencies just need to give people more options, because traffic in Massachusetts is so bad, especially in and around the Boston area. And I'm living proof when I cycle that you can cover amazing distances in half the time biking than you can driving, especially in an area as congested as Boston, Cambridge, Brookline, Somerville. Everybody knows that. Including our elected officials. I'll also say that our outgoing governor, Charlie Baker, who just left office in January, was a big proponent of having all of the agencies that build trails work together. His cabinet started the Mass Trails team, which is still together with all 3 state agencies that I mentioned earlier. He definitely viewed the whole trail building system through the lens of economic development and tourism. And, I think that was a very smart and prudent thing to do, because it's become hugely successful, and it's going to keep going through the new administration as well.
Barb, I'm going to let you go next because you got the
Okay.
politics.
Yeah, I guess I'm thinking about like, but Oregon and Washington, we're roughly the same size. If you thought about like that upper left-hand corner of the state, these are massive geographies, and they're not all the blue left-hand side. So we are working with political cultures where there is maybe less acceptance, even if the legislature might be friendly and the governor rides in my state and all of that. Those local city councils are not necessarily there, but they are all people moving around their communities, hearing about somebody's kid who got hit trying to cross the road to get to school. They will all have a personal connection. And Jessica made that point that everybody can coalesce around safety, their own safety and the safety of others. And so I think that's the central piece of it, really. That I don't want to get hit crossing the road. Do you want to get hit crossing the road? Nobody wants to get hit, and nobody wants to hit somebody else. And so I think it needs to be de-wonkified to talk about that. And it needs to be not, because I'll just say this, it needs to not be saying we're here to save the planet and we're here to accomplish all these great goals that people might think of as ideological. People should be able to cross the road without dying. That is really fundamental. And so talk about it in terms of what benefits them, not what motivates you. I guess that's as succinct as I could make it. And I think that will resonate everywhere.
Yeah, I'll just plus one to what Barb said. I mean, we just had our first gubernatorial race where there was any question who the governor was going to be at the end of the day in decades. So we are well known as a notoriously blue state, but we are becoming more and more the blue hotspot, surrounded with a majority of the state that is actively voting on not wanting to be part of the state anymore. They want to join Idaho. So we definitely have a lot of different viewpoints when it comes to the politics side of things. And our old governor, we got had an executive order on climate change that you would think would be really beneficial for us, but it wasn't. Like, people didn't identify with it. It's not something you can bring to communities and say, this is why we're doing things. But the safe routes to school, the safety piece resonates with everyone across the state, regardless of leadership, political bent. And our Complete Streets bill that we got back in the 70s was championed by a Republican from a small town in Southwest Oregon, because he had a close call with the truck when he was on a bike with a niece or a granddaughter. And it's like, this is the financially responsible way for people to be able to get around, walking and biking, as like old school fiscal conservatism. So that's how we got our complete streets bill in Oregon. And I think that that approach still resonates.
Yeah, and I think safety is the number one reason people don't bike and walk in a lot of communities and a lot of places. So if we can use data like Barb shared, showing that hidden cost of safety, if we can just keep that message up and make it known and recognized, and it's a universal human need to be safe in your physical body. And I think we can hopefully all agree on that. And recognize that we aren't providing that as a society to our people today. So it's a need for change, and we'll get a lot of biking and walking improvements along the way to a safer America, but like getting that agreement on safety being the goal of transportation agencies, and all of the political decision makers who impact what transportation agencies do. I feel is the big project right now. So we are at time. I feel like we could continue talking for a long time. And I unfortunately don't have the time to ask you how I should do my job better in public, which is a thing that I love to do. But I'm going to let you go, and I'm going to thank everyone for joining us here today, and thank all of you for being leaders at your state departments of transportation, and working with other states' departments of transportation to really push biking forward as a practice, as professional practitioners in public agencies. It's critically important work, and thank you so much for all that you do for the biking movement there. And
and thank you, Ken. This was great.
yeah,
Thanks, Ken.
have a great rest
See
of your
everybody.
day.
Everybody.
Bye.